When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
So there's some tradition, evidently, anciently, where Israelites were like, nope, can't eat that part.
Wait, was this by the hip? Get this out of here.
You didn't bring me no hip meat, did you?
I don't do hip meat.
Hey, everybody, I'm Dan McClellan.
And I'm Dan Beecher.
And you are listening to the Data Over Dogma podcast, where we increase public access to the academic study of the Bible and religion and combat the spread of misinformation about the same. How are things, Dan?
Things are good. It's springtime. It's beautiful. The leaves are on the trees. The flowers are all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't have particularly bad hay fever right now, so
all right.
I'm having a great time. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. We have a bunch of the what are they called? Is it peach? White? No, we got some kind of trees lining our street that smell awful when they're blooming, but that's all over with, so I don't have to deal with that smell anymore. Yeah, so
there you go.
Yeah, doing all right. What do we got on deck for us today?
I'm excited. Today it's all famous people. It's Bible heroes, but we're going to call it the segment Bible Heroes? Question mark? Because beauty and heroism. Heroism. That's the one. It's in the eye of the beholder, really. And I think a lot of both of these two characters that we're going to be exploring, there are many questions. So hopefully we'll get some answers about those. So let's just dive into our first Bible hero. Up first, we have Jacob. Now, that is, or at least that's how he starts out the story. But by the end, I don't think he's going to be Jacob anymore. So that's going to be confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can go through and sort of like I don't think we need to tell the whole story of Jacob, but right. We should just give a little bit of background to the Jacob story to sort of get us to the point, because there's one point that I wanted to get to. I've been asking you to do this one for a while because I find it odd and confusing, and I have also seen argument on the internet about what is happening. So Jacob is born into a family, and his father is, you have to remind me, I'm not on the right part of the Bible.
Isaac.
Isaac, right? Sorry. Yes, of course. Yes, Isaac. And he's got a brother named Esau, and there's a whole bunch of back and forth about who's the important brother, which goes on for basically all of their childhood. It feels like this is the one. He was the one that like one of them came out, they were like twins, and one of them started to come out and got the thing. Is that what? Am I?
Yeah.
They did the string around the wrist or whatever.
The one like grabs the heel, and that's a folk etymology for Jacob's name.
Oh.
So yeah.
What do we say? What is that claim? What is the claim that the name means? Means
to grab or follow hot on the heels of, something like that.
Oh,
I think that's how it's. I think in later Hebrew, that's how they use the verb.
Oh,
but the idea is like supplanter or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But another argument is that it means may he protect, or God protected or protects, or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So like a lot of these patriarchal figures, there are different stories associated with different interpretations of the name.
Okay.
But here, I think the idea is that because the older serve the younger, the idea is supplanting. That's why the story is being told that way. But yeah, and then Jacob is that rascally supplanter goes and tricks Esau out of his birthright for what does the KJV say? A mess of pottage or something? Like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But the word in Hebrew, it's a doubled word, and it means like the red.
Oh, the red.
Yeah, which is just I think a lot of scholars would suggest it's a way to represent Esau as kind of clumsily just being like the red stuff, and because he's desperate and they're trying to treat him like a fool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he sells his birthright, and then Jacob gives him some bread and the red lentil stew.
The red stuff, a little bit of red goes a long way sometimes. Sometimes you just get a hankering for that red.
Yep. And then we have Isaac dealing with Abimelech, which sounds an awful lot like, or is it Isaac who deals with? Oh my gosh, it's Abraham who deals with Abimelech, isn't it? So I'm sorry, my head is not in the right space today. I'm on some. My wife is I'm on a muscle relaxer because of an injured back, and my wife is like, that stuff messes with your brain.
Okay, so we got a half-assed episode.
Man, it's going to be a great show today.
Good show. This bodes well. This all bodes very well.
So yeah, we've got some Isaac going on. Isaac is kind of a minor figure. It's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the three main patriarchs of the book of Genesis, and Isaac is focused on the least.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, oh, Isaac was Abraham's son. Oh, Jacob was Isaac's son. Isaac, we're not too worried about.
Yeah, I mean, Isaac's probably best known for not having been killed, right? Like, like the most famous thing he did was lie down and wait for his dad not to kill him.
And maybe his dad did kill him. Yeah, there are ancient and medieval Jewish traditions that Isaac was sacrificed.
Whoa!
There are other things in the story. Like when you look in the story, it says, and the two of them walked on together, and the two of them walked on together, and they arrived at the place. And then whatever happens. And then the story concludes by saying, so Abraham returned to his young men.
Okay.
Yeah, little ominous there.
But wait, how do we get a Jacob if there's no if Isaac was killed?
Well, that's part of the story. A lot of scholars are pretty sure that these were three independently separated or circulating traditions that got woven together.
Oh, okay.
In other words, there were Abrahamites, there were Isaacites, and there were Jacobites. And at some point, they were like, we got to make this one line. Let's tell them as consecutive children of the other.
Okay.
And some scholars think that Jacob is probably the earliest, and that's probably the main tradition of Israel's origins.
Oh.
And Abraham and Isaac were added on earlier, and you get the covenant with Abraham and everything, because Isaac is the main character from then on, because Isaac has his name changed.
No, Jacob. Israel. Sorry, you're saying Isaac, but you mean Jacob.
There's that. Yeah, there's the the drugs again. Jacob has his name changed,
right,
and becomes Israel, and Israel's the main story,
right? Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a usurper? Everybody talks about Abraham as being like the big daddy of all, the Abrahamic religions and all that stuff. If he came after Jacob, that's he's the one that should be called Jacob then, because he's the one that's
there are a lot of folks who think that the earliest fragments of the of Israel's charter myth are found in the Jacob cycle, and that Abraham is a lot of the stories in Abraham are later literary layers.
Okay. Well, there you go. When your grandpa comes long after you, that's a fascinating thing to do. But that's not what we're focused on today.
Right.
So let's move on with, so Jacob, there's a whole thing where he goes with his family, or he's tending flocks, and he's got to wait for his wife. There's a whole thing there. Right.
So he goes to find a wife.
Yeah.
And Laban is the guy who's like, yeah, I got some daughters.
I got a wife or two.
And Jacob likes the look of Rachel. And he's like, work 7 years and then you can have Rachel. And then he works for him for 7 years. And then he sneaks Leah into the bridal tent.
Yeah.
And tricks Jacob. And now here we got this idea that once a man sleeps with a woman, that's kind of like the declaration, the reification of their marriage.
Right.
So he's like, as far as they're concerned, he has married Leah, and Jacob's like, ugh.
There's a lot.
The other one.
There's one of the things about this whole story that bothers me is how much trickery is just okay.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like it's just okay to like fool people and con people. And like, you know, if you fool your brother out of his birthright, if you con him and he agrees to it, shame on you. I win. And you're not the bad guy for doing that.
Yeah. But there's Jacob's so Laban tricks Jacob, but Jacob's gonna trick Laban back, and Jacob is actually going to attribute the trickery to God.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I have a friend who wrote a wonderful book on this, Jacob and the Divine Trickster, a theology of deception.
Yeah.
In the Jacob cycle. But so he works for another 7 years for Rachel.
Which is hell of a long, like, Rachel's must be very flattered at this point. This dude has worked 14 years to get her to marry him. By the way, 14 years is a long time. Hopefully, like, you know, Rachel's still as cool as she was 14 years ago. And
I'm thinking of now I can't remember the name of the movie, but I'm thinking of Marissa Tomei stomping her feet, going, "My biological clock is ticking like this."
My cousin Vinny.
My cousin Vinny.
Yeah, man.
There we go. Ooh.
You're lucky I'm here to fill in these blanks for you.
Yeah, I've got to say this could go downhill quick. But Jacob's trickery is he's got his two wives and he's ready to bounce.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to go empty-handed. He's been working for Laban for so long, and he's like, "Tell you what, go work for a while. All of the sheep and the goats that are speckled or striped or whatever, I'll take those. Everything else you can keep, and that'll be my payment." And that's what we'll go off with. And then he does some sympathetic magic, where he takes some mandrake branches and like tears off bark to make them striped and speckled and stuff, and then puts them in the water troughs. The idea being, when they come to drink, this will influence the color of the offspring that they have. Which
anyone who's studied any kind of biology knows that's how it works.
Yeah.
If a goat sees stripes, they're going to give birth to a stripy kid.
And then the idea would be to have those in the water troughs when the strongest and the biggest sheep and goat come by, and then take them out when the weak ones do. And so what happens is the litters that results next, all of the strongest ones are all speckled and striped and mottled and whatever adjectives you want to use there. And then all the weak ones are not. And so basically, Jacob uses this sympathetic magic to trick Laban into producing a whole ream of sheep and goats that are healthy and strong and big. And Jacob gets to take them all. And then he's left with the runts of the litter and all the weaker ones. And then Jacob actually says that it was God who did it.
Yeah. Well, God's probably behind the magic, so it's not a total lie. The trickster thing, the con artist deal really messes with my head. I do not understand why this is all like, because none of that's ever condemned in the book. All of that is like totally okay. But it's a different time. It's a different society. I'll let it go. What we're building toward, though, is Jacob's on his way back to his, ancestral home.
Yeah. So he goes. Rebecca steals Laban's gods. Laban shows up, and then they have a heart-to-heart. And then they, shake hands on it, and they each swear to their different ancestral deities, and they keep going on. And Jacob is nervous because he's going to meet up with Esau.
Oh, right. Yeah. He's worried that Esau's gonna kill him.
Right. And in the beginning, it says Jacob went on his way and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called that place Machanaim, camps. And then in anticipation of meeting up with Esau, Jacob wants to grease the skids a little bit. So he sends some gifts on ahead just to show him he comes in good faith.
Yes.
But he's got to spend the night by the river Yabok.
Sure, like you do. Generally you have to.
Yeah. And he's got all his stuff there. And we just have this weird story. There's no intro. They don't ease it into you. They don't, there's...
It is literally my favorite, like one of my favorite things that has ever happened in the Bible is when Jacob is left alone. This is verse 24. It says, Jacob was left alone and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Which makes it sound like in ancient times, every now and then someone was just lying in wait and would jump out from behind a bush and be like, wrestle! And now we got a wrestle. And so now he's in the wrestle of his life. And generally speaking, if that happened to me, I would not just continue wrestling a stranger for until daybreak. But
and what's interesting is right before this happens, it says he got up, took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Yabok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. So he's actually like, all right, everybody, get on the other side of the river.
Go.
I got man stuff to do. and then that night it's just like, so anyway, some dude was wrestling with him.
Yeah. And he's like, it's very funny. He is like the object of the wrestle. Like, he was wrestled at, is what happened.
Yeah, he's not the agent. He's not the subject of the verb. This other guy who's...
He just got wrestled until daybreak.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Verse 25 says, when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. So Jacob's winning.
Yeah, or at least not losing.
Against said man, and then the guy gives him, the little hammer fist to the hip, and
the old hip socket Rooney. I think that was Ric Flair's big move, wasn't it?
If it's not Jake the Snake Roberts, it doesn't matter. So then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So his socket's out of hip, but he's got
him in the full Nelson.
Hold on him.
He's got him pinned basically. He can't get away. Whoever this stranger is. And
for us, the blessing part seems odd.
Yeah.
Like if you were just camping out and some guy jumped in your campground and was like, "We're gonna wrestle," and you're like, subdue him,
right?
You're gonna be like, "Bless me."
Yeah, exactly.
Like, why is that the outcome of
I'm not gonna let you tap out until I get a nice little blessing.
Yeah, and it's not like, maybe this is a kind of say uncle thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, but then the man says, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." And this is another folk etymology for the name Israel.
Right.
Because the name Israel is not unique to Hebrew. This is
interesting.
A name that is actually known in Ugaritic. It's known at Mari. There are texts that go back 1,000 years before this was written that have this name. And the name basically means El contends.
Right.
But it's kind of squishy. You can interpret it a few different ways. And so the idea that Jacob has striven or contended with God and with humans is kind of the folk etymology. In other words, Jacob is the one who contended with God.
Yeah.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by overpriced wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I heard that for a limited time, all Mint Mobile wireless plans are $15 a month when you purchase the 3-month plan, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them, it all makes sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they sell wireless service online. They don't have retail stores or salespeople. Instead, They deliver premium phone plans directly to you.
And we've actually been using Mint Mobile for a while. We got our 15-year-old daughter a plan. We had a spare iPhone. We got the SIM card and put it in, and it works great. Even at her high school, which is kind of outside of the coverage for my phone, her phone works great. So you can say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, draw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected charges. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. They all come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network.
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/dogma. That's mintmobile.com/dogma. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/dogma.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Hey there, I'm Dylan Lewis, one of the hosts of Motley Fool Money. Each weekday on Motley Fool Money, we talk through the business news you need to know and the stories moving stocks on Wall Street. On weekends, we dive into the industries shaping tomorrow and host the experts, authors, and executives that understand them. Tune in for insights, a long-term perspective on investing, and of course, stock ideas. Plenty of them. To quote a listener, it pays to listen. Check us out and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
So by that, I'm just a naive guy. I'm just a small town country lawyer just trying to make sense of all of this. But it seems to me that what we have just learned is if you don't, even the loser of a wrestle can just change your name all of a sudden. No, but the main thing is this was God.
Yeah.
It says, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and have prevailed. That's pretty clear to me. Would you say that is a fair assertion?
I think at this point in the narrative, with the details that have been given, you've got to arrive at that conclusion, because it says you've striven or contended or wrestled with God and with man, or with the divine and with the human. And up till now, all we've seen is stories of Jacob contending with humans like Laban, like Esau, and others. And so it sure seems like this is a story about somehow Jacob contending with God. And then he asks for the man's name, and he says, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And then he blessed him. And this kind of hiding the name is something that you see deities doing in narratives from the ancient world. Because once you know a deity's name, you can influence them, you can invoke their presence, you can exercise a little power. And then verse 30 says, so Jacob called the place Peniel, which would mean face of God. For I have seen God face to face, yet my life is preserved.
Right. So, with all of that in place, it seems to me that it's a little weird to me, because I have heard many, many people say Jacob wrestles with an angel.
Yes.
So
that is...
it feels like I'm taking crazy pills when I hear that, because what I'm reading says he wrestled with God.
Yeah, well, there's nowhere in this text where the word for angel comes up at all.
Okay.
And so we have, but the angelic reading finds evidence in another part of the Bible, specifically in the book of Hosea. So if we go to, this is the prophetic book of Hosea, chapter 12, we have, you'll recall I said some scholars think Jacob is the main charter myth for the nation of Israel. In Hosea chapter 12, the prophet is kind of given the people a hard time. It says the Lord has an indictment against Judah and will punish Jacob according to his ways. And elsewhere, Hosea suggests that Jacob was a wandering Aramaean. He had to be a slave for 14 years just to get the wife he wanted. Loser. But we have Moses, the prophet who led the people out from Egypt. And the idea being, hey, you got two choices regarding where Israel originates from. You've got the patriarchal Jacob tradition, or you've got the prophetic Moses tradition. So some people think that these are two competing myths about Israel's origins. However, Hosea gives Jacob a hard time. He's in the womb, he tried to supplant his brother, and in his manhood, he strove with God. So we've got Elohim right there. And then in verse 4, translations say he strove with the angel and prevailed. Now, an interesting thing about this, I'm going to pull up the Hebrew real quick.
Yes, please.
So in Hebrew, it's Vayasar el Malach. So that is, and he strove, el can be used as a preposition to or in the direction of. Here it seems to be functioning almost like a direct object marker with or to the angel, Malach. But I have argued that malach here was an interpolation, that somebody added it later. Because if you take it out and you treat el not as a preposition, but as the Hebrew noun God,
right,
then you have vayasar el. You have exactly the consonants in the name Israel.
Oh.
Yod, sin, resh, aleph, lamed. And so this would be taking the folk etymology for Israel's name and just kind of giving it a punch right in the nose.
Okay.
So he strove with God, vayasar el. Although if you interpreted it that way, then el is the subject, and it would be el prevailed or el contended. God is the one who won. And one of the reasons that I think this is a preferable reading is because the very next clause says he wept and sought his favor. And a lot of people suggest it wasn't God who wept and sought Jacob's favor. It was Jacob who wept and sought God's favor.
Right.
At least it seems like we got two very different stories going on here.
Yeah.
Because the Genesis thing doesn't say anything about anybody weeping. It does say that Jacob was like, bless me.
Yeah.
And the only favor that the other entity asked for was just to be released. And he was not till I get my blessing.
Yeah.
So it seems like I imagine that the reading in Hosea 12:4, and it's verse 5 in the Hebrew, is where we get the angelic interpretation of this. But I think that the word angel there was probably interpolated. Somebody added it in.
Right.
Probably not too long after the story was originally in circulation.
Well, and there's good reason to do that, because we know that there are parts of the Bible, right, that say no one can see God and live. Right? Am I wrong about that?
You are not wrong about that.
Okay.
So that is Exodus 33:20. This is where God is talking with Moses, and Moses says, "Show me your glory."
Yeah.
And God says, kind of like picks him up and says, I'm going to put you on this rock over here. And then I will cause my goodness to pass by you, but I will take my hand and I'll cover up your face until I've passed. And then I'll take it away. So you will see my back, but you will not see my face, because no human can see me and live.
Right.
And the idea here is basically that the deity is so brilliant and shiny that it's deadly to look at.
It'll
cook staring at the sun.
It'll cook your brain, unless you're Jacob. Like if you wear him out and get him down to a, if you go full Hoist Gracie on him, and wrestle,
it's got to be Brazilian or capoeira.
Yeah, sure.
You're dancing at the same time.
Yeah, man.
You want to kill him with your sublimeness.
But if you're a grappler, and you then you can see, because it literally says, I have seen God face to face. Mm-hmm. So that puts the lie to this whole. So yes, what we don't want. It's so rare that the Bible ever contradicts itself. I don't even know why we're talking about it, but I can see why people would have a problem saying that Jacob wrestled with God. Not just because of the death things, but because God is meant to be, pretty big and strong. So
Yeah.
a guy being able to like get a submission out of God is that's a hell of a wrestle right there.
Yeah. Those are some pretty muscular bona fides there. And you see this with a number of episodes where somebody had an encounter with a divine being, where either the narrative or the characters themselves go back and forth between identifying the individual as God or an angel. And I've argued that, and you see them saying, "Oh, I can't look at you, I'm going to die," or "Is it possible that I've seen God and lived?" or "We've seen God, we're going to die." Like that happens several times, and I think in all of those instances, other scholars have noted that the angel is not doing angelic things.
Right.
They're not doing things angels are supposed to be doing. They're doing things that God is supposed to be doing. And so these are probably stories that originated in traditions about God themselves interacting with people. And then later on, somebody came in and wrote angel in there just to kind of muddy the waters. They're not saying this wasn't God, this was an angel. They kind of leave it half and half just to confuse things.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what you've got going on here, even though the edit wasn't made until Hosea 12, way off on the other side of the Bible.
You know what it is? It's that kind of adding that level of confusion is a permissible con. They're doing the con thing.
Yeah, a little bit of trickery there, and the idea is just to mask God's presence. Ooh, was it God? We don't know. You're not sure,
right?
But at the same time, it also refers to God as a man. You multiple times you have an ish, a man, the one who's represented that way. And so Esther Hamori wrote a wonderful book called "When Gods Were Men," and it was all about divine anthropomorphism and how you've got this story and a couple others where God is referred to as a man, and somebody who's, it doesn't say whether people confuse God for a human, but they kind of just treat him as like a human. When God, for instance, in Genesis 18 appears to Abraham, says, and there were three men, and Abraham was like, "Whoa, it's you," and treats the entity like he knows who they are.
Well, and we also get the story in Genesis 3, I guess, of God walking through the garden.
Oh, yeah.
And that it doesn't seem like it's some amazing, giant, powerful. It just seems like it's another guy.
Yeah, it says they heard the sound of him walking in the garden in the cool of the afternoon, the breeze of the afternoon.
Yeah,
and so repeatedly, the Bible, you have different representations of what God looks like. You have kind of apocalyptic, theophanic visions of God, where God is high and mighty on a throne, or God is, riding this chariot made of living beings and Ophanim, and kind of, what we get in Ezekiel 1, whereas like where there should have been a body, it had the appearance of something that kind of looked like maybe humanoidish, and like, Ezekiel is really trying to say this is what God looks like, but it's not really what God looks like, or you didn't hear it from me.
Right.
But when you have narratives where God interacts directly with humans, which happen, it's always pretty straightforward. Yeah. God is human-sized, human-shaped, male-presenting, a very anthropomorphic depiction. To the degree that the eponymous hero of the nation of Israel himself, Jacob, is able to subdue him in a wrestling match.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there you have it. That's Jacob. That's now he's Israel. So I find that a fascinating story. I don't know what to do with it, but there it is.
Well, there's one more piece. There's one more piece, just in case you didn't have enough loose threads.
Good.
The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Yeah. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket at the thigh muscle. So there's some tradition, evidently, anciently, where Israelites were like, nope, can't eat that part.
Don't eat. No. Wait, was this by the hip? Get this out of here. Okay.
You didn't bring me no hip meat, did you?
I don't do hip meat. All right. That's fascinating. And now let's move on to another hero ? We're gonna do Samson.
we're gonna continue to muddy up the waters.
Yeah. Samson is another story that everybody kind of thinks they know. But when I read through it, first of all, like his whole story is bananas. It's and a lot of it I didn't understand at all. There's this whole thing about him encountering, he kills a lion at one point in his story.
Yeah.
And then he comes back to it a couple weeks later and it's rotting, but there's bees that have built a hive in the lion's carcass, and that all sets up a weird riddle that he tells that no one could like. Again, he's cheating at riddles is one of the things that I'm going to say, because you can't if you have a riddle competition, you can't be like, haha, what's in my aunt's basement underneath the sofa or whatever, because like it's got to be something somebody could figure out.
Yeah, can't go all Bilbo on him.
Right.
Just be like, what's in my pocket?
Right, exactly. But Samson proves throughout his story to be relatively easily duped, especially if it comes to a lady person.
Yes, he's not a particularly smart man.
No.
And to start, his birth was announced by probably originally God themselves.
Oh, wow.
This is one of the stories.
Okay.
You've got his dad's name is Manoach, and it never says who his mom is, but in Judges 13, they are there, and suddenly the narrative says an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and basically they're going to have a kid, and the angel says, not to cut his hair and all this, and no razor is to come on his head, for the boy shall be a Nazirite to God from birth. It is he who shall begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines.
Now, we've heard the word Nazirite before. We heard that a couple weeks ago when we talked to Dr. McGrath about John the Baptist.
Yeah.
What is a Nazirite?
So a Nazirite, we find this in Numbers, I think it's number 6, where this is a type of vow that a person can take upon themselves. And my understanding is that it was usually a temporary thing, where you would be like, hey, I'm gonna take the vow of the Nazirite for the next year. I'm gonna go walk about, do a gap year. I'm gonna take the Nazirite vow, and basically means you can't cut your hair at all. You're supposed to avoid grape products, and particularly wine. Oh. And then you're supposed to entirely avoid contact with corpses.
Okay.
Now, normally that just renders a person ritually unclean for a certain number of days, and there are things you have to do to cleanse yourself of that ritual impurity. And you have to at some point or another, but the Nazirite is not allowed to, period, not even for their own parents, for their own children. Right. They're supposed to avoid that entirely. And the idea seems to be just to kind of maintain a heightened sense of ritual purity.
It's sort of an ascetic, like almost a monastic sort of thing.
Yeah, and this probably is what made, with John the Baptist at least, this is probably what allowed that tradition to kind of dovetail with asceticism, which was something that you did find in some Greco-Roman social groups. And so it kind of made it seem a little more natural. But normally, like I said, as far as I understand, this was usually a temporary thing. So we know of 3 people in the Bible that seem to have been lifetime Nazirites, or at least according to the story, that's how they come across. John the Baptist was one, and then Samuel is another. Hannah says, I'll give him to you all the days of his life if I can have a son. And so Hannah gives birth to Samuel, and Samuel is dedicated to priestly service. And then we have Samson, who is supposed to be the 3rd lifetime Nazirite, which kind of seems like a raw deal. Yeah. I imagine once you're, as a kid, you're like, why don't I get a haircut, Mom? And she's like, oh, so funny story. Yeah. You'll love this. But as soon as this angel disappears after promising that that Manoach's wife would have a child, he says, "We shall surely die, because we have seen God."
Hey-oh.
Another example.
We've tied it all back. It's all it's all making sense now. It's all tying itself together.
So
speaking of tying itself together, can we just briefly mention the foxes? Because this is the most insane part of the entire Samson story. And I know you're going to get to like real stuff, but there's a moment where Samson is like bitterly trying to ruin everything for, what was this? It was it was supposed to be his father-in-law, but then he didn't get married at the last minute or whatever. Again, because of trickery, I think. Anyway, the way that he exacts his revenge is like, here's the thing. If I absolutely needed to, there's just no way I could gather, let's say 5 foxes. I couldn't trap 10 foxes. He gets like 300 foxes.
Yeah.
Ties them tail to tail with each other, lights them on fire, and sends them into his supposed father-in-law's fields.
Yeah.
How do you get that many foxes? You can't get that many foxes. First of all, and also just why are you being cruel to foxes? That's not very nice.
You can't get them to hold still for long enough to tie 300 of them together.
No. I mean, if his brother had a fox farm, he couldn't get that many foxes. Anyway, sorry, that's neither here nor there.
Sick of those trivia podcasts that you don't even understand how to operate and they just have too many levers and buttons?
There's got to be a better way.
Now there is, with Good Job Brain, an offbeat quiz show and trivia podcast that makes learning new things easy and fun.
I just learned that artificial vanilla flavoring sometimes comes from the anal glands of a beaver, and now I can never shake that mental image. Thanks, Good Job Brain.
Good Job Brain is available for the low price of just 4 easy payments of free. It's a podcast.
Good Job Brain is part of Airwave Media and available on all podcast apps. Operators are standing by.
When Johann Rall received the letter on Christmas Day 1776, he put it away to read later. Maybe he thought it was a season's greeting and wanted to save it for the fireside. But what it actually was a warning, delivered to the Hessian colonel, letting him know that General George Washington was crossing the Delaware and would soon attack his forces. The next day, when Rall lost the Battle of Trenton and died from 2 colonial Boxing Day musket balls, the letter was found, unopened, in his vest pocket. As someone with 15,000 unread emails in his inbox, I feel like there's a lesson there. Oh well, this is The Constant, a history of getting things wrong. I'm Mark Chrysler. Every episode, we look at the bad ideas, mistakes, and accidents that misshaped our world. Find us at constantpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
The interesting thing about Samson is that he's growing up right on the borders of the Philistine territory and the Israelite hill country. So if you go to Israel and Palestine, one of the places you can visit is Tel Beit Shemesh, which is a very cool site that has a gigantic underground aquifer that you can go down into. It's no water in it anymore, but you can go down into it. But from that site, you can see the places, Timnah, you can see these other places, and you're looking down a valley toward what's called the Shvelah, or the coastal plains. And the Philistines occupied the coastal plains. The Israelites were in the hill country. Samson's growing up basically right in the middle of this. So he's just, he's growing up at that kind of liminal space between Israelites and Philistines. And in this time period, the Philistines are supposed to be giving the Israelites a hard time. That's one of their main kind of battlegrounds is those Philistines are after us again.
Yeah, it does feel like that is sort of a constant, like if you need an enemy for your story, just chuck in a couple Philistines and you'll be good to go. Or 1,000 of them, which is the number that Samson manages to kill using only the jawbone of a donkey, which is impressive. I'll give him that. They must have been, learned how to fight watching too much TV and movies where they all just wait their turn and go in after him.
Yeah, but it's kind of just a comedy of errors with Samson. He always seems to find himself butting heads with Philistines, and is shown to have like superhuman strength and everything like that. And so the defeating of the lion is supposed to be this miraculous. Wow, with his bare hands, can you even imagine?
Right.
But the thing that keeps coming up is he keeps performing these feats of strength that are then somehow associated with symbols for fertility. So honey is a symbol of fertility. Okay. And so is water, which comes up in another story. And I don't think there's a ton of significance to like the honey appearing in the carcass of the lion, but
it's so weird.
It's cool. Like, I'm taking some with me.
Literally, like that's the weirdest thing. I did hear someone say an explanation about how they used to think that bees. I don't know if I buy it, that bees liked carcasses of animals. I don't think that that's true. I think there are some wasps that like the carcass. I went down a rabbit hole, but the bee honey, the lion honey thing is crazy. I think there's a brand of syrup, of golden syrup in the UK that has a picture of a lion and some bees around it, of like a dead lion and bees around it as their logo, which is weird. But we should get to the part of the Samson story that everybody kind of thinks they know.
Yeah.
Which is that we're going to chapter 16, Judges chapter 16.
So Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a sex worker and went into her.
Yeah.
So patronized her business.
And that is not condemned in this. Like that's just a normal thing to do.
Yeah. And you see this a lot. Judah does it. It ends up being Tamar, his daughter-in-law.
Right.
And again, trickery. And he's like, you got me.
You got me. You got me good. Oh, you
got me real good. The Gazites were told Samson has come here, so they circled around and lay wait for him all night at the city gate.
Yeah.
And but Samson was like, I'm going to take off about around midnight. And it says he took hold of the doors of the city gate and the two posts, pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that is in front of Hebron.
Why did he take the door?
It's another, this is a Festivus feat of strength.
Yes, exactly.
He's like, I got to show these puppies who's boss.
He was really feeling his oats after that time with the sex worker. All right.
He couldn't stop thinking about her.
Yeah.
And so Delilah is the one that he falls in love with. And as usual, everybody's like, she's a Philistine. Why you got to do this with Philistine?
Why can't you find a nice Jewish girl? So yes, he finds a Philistine woman named Delilah, and in a mirror of what happened in the previous thing. We didn't really talk about it, but previously in his story, he's in love with this other woman, and the men enlist the other woman to trick him, so that he will give them the answer to the riddle that was unsolvable. Yeah. Now we have other men using Delilah to trick him, to try and trick him into revealing what will cause him to lose his strength.
And each time the first few times he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, baby, it's this." Turns out to be a lie, and she gets mad at him.
Yeah,
after he thwarts the assassination attempt, she's like, "Do you really not love me?
Yeah, it's
keep lying to me."
So let's just go through it. She says, "Hey, tell me what makes your strength so great and how you could be bound." She's like, "Is it even possible?" And he sees it coming. He gets that this is a trick, and he lies to her. And he says, "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that are not dried out, then I shall become weak and be like anyone else." And they sneak in while he's asleep, and they tie him up with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried out. And he wakes up and he's just like, "Pling, I'm free. You didn't get me. beats up everybody or whatever. So he knows that she is trying to get him, that she's in cahoots with bad men who want to get him.
Yeah.
And then she tries it again. She's like, hey, but seriously, tell me though. And he's like, oh, okay. If they bind me with new ropes that have not been used, then I shall become weak and be like anyone else. And she's like, you promise? And he's like, yeah. And so they do it again. They sneak in, they tie him up with new ropes that have not been used. And he just snaps those open too. It's no problem.
I like if you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and make it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak and be like anyone else. So basically, if you give me a man bun, then I'm useless.
Yeah.
And
if you braid
my man card is revoked.
I think in some of am I wrong? In some of the translations, it says if you like weave it into a loom, like you have to loom my hair.
Yeah.
How this guy did not wake up for any of this, I will never know. But again, a third time, the Philistines like come in and try and get him. They weave his hair, and then they make it tight with a pin. They do a pretty French braid, and then he wakes up and beats the crap out of him again. I just don't. Okay, this is one of those moments where it just becomes, this is not believable. There's no way that this is believable, because then after every time she asks him something, he says a different thing, and suddenly there's bad guys attacking him. A, he does not know when to leave a relationship. I'm just going to say that. But B, she finally nags him enough, and he tells her? Like, is this just oh man, look, I just want to be done with this now. So, yeah. And he's like, hey, if you cut my hair, that would actually do it. And they're like, okay, well, let's just try it. And it works.
And it says, it's interesting in verse 18, before it happens, it says, when Delilah realized that he had told her his whole secret, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they cut his hair, and he didn't cut his own hair, but he gave away the secret, which allowed someone else to cut his hair. And it says his strength left him, and then it said the Lord left him.
Oh, wow.
So he had responsibility for keeping his hair unshorn.
Yeah.
And he failed on that. And then they gouged out his eyes and brought him back to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles. And he ground at the mill in the prison. But the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. So that's your little foreshadowing at the end of Act 2.
Right.
You close in on him pushing the flour grinding thing, and you can see the hair slowly.
One little hair goes, pling.
Yep. Pling. So then we get to verse 23. The lords of the Philistines are gathered to offer a great sacrifice to their god Dagon, and to rejoice, for they said, our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hands. And I would actually suggest that Dagon was probably not a Philistine deity. That was a Northwest Semitic deity, and the Philistines were from further west in the Mediterranean region. So they could have adopted Dagon at some point, but it would not have been anywhere near this early. This is putting this like the instant they show up in this part of the world. So.
Interesting. So the idea that you're saying is that whoever wrote this just grabbed a non Israelite deity and just chucked it in there, or
either that, or they are writing from a much later time period when anybody who was Philistine may have adopted the worship of one of the local deities.
Okay.
So maybe Dagon is a Philistine deity in like the 8th or the 7th century BCE.
Okay.
But in the 12th, 11th century BCE, they're not even there for part of the 12th century. And they probably have not adopted the worship of a local deity.
And you're saying, sorry, that the 12th century BCE is when the Samson story is meant to have happened.
It's around there. Depends on when you date Judges.
Okay.
But yeah, it's supposed to be around that time period.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's grown a couple hairs, which seems to be sufficient, because when they put blind Samson against 2 pillars in the Philistine, I guess, temple. Mm-hmm. He says a little prayer about like, give me just one more try, God, just one more last burst of strength. And he pulls the pillars down and drops the building on all of them, including himself.
Yeah. And it says those that he killed at his death were more than those he had killed during his life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a solid... I mean, does that include foxes? Because then it's a big number.
Yeah, I don't know if he was labeling the foxes Philistines, but it's a story of this champion who was able to make the first big dent in the Philistine armor, because that had been their main enemies. And we get in verse 31, then his kindred and all his family came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father Manoah. And he had judged Israel 20 years. And a lot of these stories, like with Jephthah, for instance, they seem to be kind of tragic tales of warning more than anything else. But at the same time, the people are just celebrated for what they do. When, Samson is celebrated, he's given an honorable burial with his father. Jephthah was celebrated as well, was somebody who, and the text repeatedly says that the Lord's Spirit came upon him. So these judges are not just it's not like designate somebody a judge and they're just off doing their own thing. And look, they happen to do a bunch of stupid stuff, but they managed to kill some Philistines. Like a lot of the things that they do are explicitly designated as the outcome of God's Spirit rushing upon them.
Yeah,
So
it does seem like, and we should talk a little bit, because I don't really know, the judges, this was sort of before, this was pre-monarchic in their culture, right? Like the idea is that the judges, they're not the kings, but they're like bigwigs or important people. I don't know. What is a judge in this case? What are we talking about?
So the Hebrew term is shofet, and it's just someone who judges. And the idea is that they have some kind of judicial power over a tribe or a group. So chieftain might be something that makes a little more sense to us today. But basically, they're warlords. They have they've won battles, and so everybody's like, "You're the man." We're not worthy, and then they'll follow them, and they judge for however long they can keep their power. And you have major judges, and then you also have minor judges that are listed, or they'll just rattle off some names. So and so also judged, and they're in different parts of the territory. And it's basically like, this is what happens without a king, when we just kind of let the winds of change blow whatever warlord is in town into power. This is how it goes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's trying to suggest that God's power is still acting in the area as well, and God is bringing about their purposes.
Yeah, it does. I mean, like you said, like Samson very clearly has is meant to have had God with him this whole time, because God's taken away from him. But he's not like... He's a might makes right kind of guy. He is not a wise, he's not any of the things that I associate with the term judge. He's not a smart guy. He's a pretty dumb guy. He manages to kill about a lot of people, but only because he's got this brute strength. He doesn't manage, he's not a strategy expert or anything.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, yeah, he just bumbles his way through everything. I think that it's a really interesting story, in that respect. I find it baffling. I don't know what the takeaway is meant to be.
Yeah, that happens a lot in Judges. You're like, all right, cool,
great, thanks, you guys.
Yeah, it's not exactly clear, but I think one of the main ideas there is a statement you get repeated a bunch is, there was no king in the land. Everybody did what was right in their own eyes. And so part of it is kind of an apology for the monarchy and for saying, hey, we want a king because without a king, here's all the goofy stuff that happens.
Right.
And so I think that's at least partly what's going on here. I don't think that can account for everything, but that's certainly in view with the way they're bringing this together. Now, a lot of these stories are very old. A lot of scholars would say you have kind of there's a narrative framework kind of weaving together all these stories that are being gathered from all over, some of them older, some of them younger. There are a lot of scholars who think some of the early parts of Judges, Judges 5, maybe Judges 9 through 11, maybe some of these go back to traditions that existed before Israel was even a thing, back when they may have just been a bunch of kind of confederated tribes or bands roaming around. So Judges is a complex story, complex set of texts. Some of it's very old, some of it's very young. It's very clearly not all doing the same thing either. So if you're hoping to be able to put one lens on it and get everything out of it that's there, that's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, there you go. We didn't even talk about the moment where Samson loses the bet, which by the way, he made a bet that he did not have, he could not back up. He did not have the sufficient things on his, he bet money he couldn't afford. He didn't have. Yeah. He bet tunics that he didn't have, and had to go and kill a bunch of dudes to steal their tunics so that he could pay his bet off.
These are our heroes?
Right, yeah. That's why the segment is called Heroes? ? Anyway, that's fascinating. You and I are about to go off and have and talk to our patrons. So if anybody wants to hear the after party, they can go to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/Data Over Dogma and sign up there. And you can get an early ad-free version of every show, and you get the if you sign up at the right level, you'll get the after party with us, extra bonus content. So go sign up for that. We'd really appreciate that. It's basically the main way that we fund this thing. So we really appreciate your help there. If you want to write into us, it's contact@dataoverdogmapod.com. And Dan, we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye, everybody.
Data Over Dogma is a member of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. It is a production of Data Over Dogma Media, LLC, copyright 2024, all rights reserved.